Hi everybody, I'm Ryan, and today we're going to talk about red-black mid-range and the flex slots that you could be playing in this red-black mid-range deck. And I'm going to say right up front, I'm very worried this video isn't going to be helpful at all because this deck is still trying to figure itself out in this post-vampire combo shell. So let me just show you. So these are the not flex slots in the red-black mid-range deck. As you can see, only 43 cards in the main deck and 9 cards in the sideboard are like kind of set in stone. I'm queued up for a challenge. Hold up, let me get rid of that. That's really funny. There we go. Whoops. And just take a look at this. I'm not really going to talk about each card in this like non-flex slots of the deck, but notice there's also a bunch of lands. I've already talked about these cards in the deck tech. You should check that out. It was posted a few weeks ago. But let's look at all of the flex slots you can play in these 17 slots in the main deck and these 6 slots in the sideboard. And it's a lot. As you can see, I'm a little worried that this video might not be super helpful, but at least this can give you options of what to play in these slots in the future. Weirdly enough, you can almost make a full deck with all of the cards that you could be playing in these flex slots in the red-black mid-range deck. So you want to play 25 lands. Let me double check. I believe there's 16 lands that are not flex slots. Okay, so you want to pick 9 of these lands to play. And really, besides the utility lands, you're mostly just trying to get a powerful mana base that you have. Make sure you have black on turn 1 and have access to red by turn 2. So knowing that, you can use your intuition or look at decks if you'd like, but I'll just talk about the utility lands. Castle Lothwain is really good against these slower decks because it allows you to draw into more cards. It's falling out of favor because of all the aggro decks that are in Pioneer, but it's still a very powerful card. Den of the Bugbear, similarly, what we don't like about Den of the Bugbear is it produces red in the early turns, where we really need black in the early turns. Black is the primary color of this deck, but is a very good aggressive attacker. Mutavault's a really cool early blocker and a really cheap attacker. The issue is that colorless is really tough because it's a pretty mana and color hungry deck. Sokenzon is often free, but it is decidedly not a basic, where you can channel it and get 2 1/1 colorless spirits. And then Takenuma, similar to Sokenzon, is a little free, but is notably not a basic, where you can mill 3 cards, return a creature or planeswalker from graveyard to your hand. Those are the utility cards. You want to pick 9 of these cards to add to your mana base to make sure that you have your colors and also your mana actually does something. As far as the rest of the main deck, Torch the Tower is a part of the removal spell suite. You mostly want to play this if you're looking to exile. It's a decent cheap removal against these aggro decks as well, but mostly you'd be playing Torch the Tower for like Phoenix and things like that. Bitter Triumph is a great unconditional removal spell. Notably, it kills planeswalkers. Go for the Throat, which is here as well, is probably a little bit better if you're only worried about creatures, but if you want to make sure that you can take out planeswalkers as well, Bitter Triumph is probably worth it, even though you have to pay 3 life or discard a card. Heartless Act is very good if you think you're going to be playing against a lot of those 6/6 demons that we are playing. Removing counters from creatures is very powerful. Sheoldred's Edict is a pretty good unconditional removal. It's really good against like different token strategies because you can take out their primary like enabler. It's also like can pretty unconditionally kill planeswalkers as well. Croxa is really good against the slower decks. It'll make them discard a card early on and then can just be a finisher later on. But you have to make sure you're actually playing against these slower decks because it does literally nothing, it feels like, against the faster decks. Reckoner Bankbuster, also pretty good against the slower decks, allows you to draw additional cards. Graveyard Trespasser is awesome graveyard hate, and it allows you to gain a little bit of life and is a creature on a stick that is actually pretty hard for other mid-range decks to handle, so it's really good against graveyard decks and mid-range decks. Unstoppable Slasher is kind of the new hotness in this deck. It's a 3-mana 2/3 with Death Touch. It deals combat damage to a player. They lose half their life rounded up. And when Unstoppable Slasher dies, it had no counters on it, returned to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control with 2 stun counters on it. So it's a very hard to answer creature. Has Death Touch, so it's really hard to block, especially since it comes back when people block it. And when it deals damage, they lose half their life total. Rounded up. So it can deal an absurd amount of damage if people let it through. And a lot of people are playing up to 4 of these cards in the deck and just jamming in with Unstoppable Slasher, which is pretty sweet. 2 Lilianas in case you're worried about control or the Enmatic deck or something like that. Kolaghan's Command, again, it's a lot of utility, mostly good against the slower decks because you can make them discard, remove something, get a creature from your graveyard to your hand, And Shieldred is slowly getting back into favor against these like up the beanstalk decks and stuff like that, and Treasure Cruise and whatever. Now you're going to be picking 9 of these lands and 8 of these other cards to add to your no flex slots in the deck, which is a lot of decisions to be made, actually. And it's kind of cool that a deck like this has a ton of freedom, frankly. Now, as far as sideboard cards, you're going to want to be picking 6 of these cards. Duress, very good against Control and Enigmatic and Phoenix and non-creature things that we're worried about. Similarly with Go Blank, the second Go Blank is very good against all of those decks. Any slower deck that you want to Mind Rot against, but also attacking the graveyard is powerful. Liliana, we've already talked about. Extinction Event is very, very good against Mono Green, as you can just say odd and take out all of their creatures. But also it's just a decent board wipe otherwise. Leyline of the Void is excellent for graveyard hate. The End is a pretty cool unconditional removal, though it's a little expensive, but it's very good against decks that you know as a playset of a key card. So things like Phoenix or the Demon or something like that. This is mostly really good against mid-range strategies, and right now mid-range isn't super powerful in Pioneer. But if you plan on playing against mid-range quite a bit, The End is pretty strong. Torch Tower, we've already talked about. Magebane Lizard is really strong against decks like Phoenix and Lotus and stuff like that. Pyroclasm, obviously like a board wipe against the little weenie decks. The issue is the most powerful aggro deck is the red-black deck, and often they have more than 2 toughness, so it's a little hard. We've already talked about Kolaghan's Command. Damping Sphere is excellent against the decks like Phoenix and the Lotus deck, and it's also pretty good against the Nykthos deck, and things like that. I've already talked about Reckoner Bankbuster, and Unlicensed Hearse is just additional graveyard hate. So you're going to be picking 6 of these cards to add to your deck. There are the flex slots in the red-black mid-range deck. I'm a little worried this video isn't helpful because there's so many things you can add to your deck, but a customizable deck is pretty sweet, especially since this is a totally playable mid-tier 2 deck that I really like. So if you like this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on social medias. Links are above me and in the description. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.